it's finally time to talk about Ultima Underworld II, Labyrinth of Worlds. Released in 1993 and developed by LookingGlass Technologies, Ultima Underworld II has some pretty big shoes to fill, as the Stygian Abyss was already an excellent dungeon crawling game. Due to quick development time, Ultima Underworld II came out a little less than a year after the first game, which is pretty impressive considering that Ultima Underworld II is still as much and maybe even a little bit better than the original game. Things like slightly better graphics, a bigger game window, visually distinct environments, a more interesting storyline, and better character portraits. As far as to how the game plays though, well, if you've played the original, you're pretty much right at home here. The game controls in much the same way, with jumping being as tedious as ever. The character creation is the same, and I definitely appreciate the fact that you can play a paladin with high strength this time rather than a druid in the first game. All the skills are back, leveling up is the same, though this time around you have trainers back at Castle British who can train you in various skills, as well as a few others during your adventure. Which is honestly a welcome change versus reciting different mantras at the Ankh shrines in Underworld 1. In that game, you have to actually find specific mantras for certain skills unless you're okay with looking up a guide for your first or later playthroughs. But other than that, if you've enjoyed Underworld 1, you're likely to enjoy the sequel. While the original game had its own standalone storyline, Ultima Underworld 2 follows the events of Ultima VII The Black Gate and serves as a bridge up to Ultima VII Part 2 Serpent Isle. There's actually an Easter egg item in Underworld 2 that you can easily miss, which serves as a plot important item in the following game. It's not required at all to play this game in order to understand the full story of Serpent Isle, but it is recommended to play the Black Gate first if you want to jump into Ultima Underworld 2. Many returning characters and companions make an appearance, such as Julia, Dupre, Yolo, and Lord British of course. Though Shamino is strangely absent, which is weird because he's a pretty important character in Serpent Isle along with Dupre and Yolo. But other side characters from the Black Gate show up, such as Syria, who was involved in a side quest in one of the towns in Ultima VII, Nell the Chambermaid and her brother Charles, Lady Tory from Serpent's Hold, Patterson, the Mayor of Britain, and so on and so forth. These characters reference side quests you've done in the Black Gate, so it's really recommended to play that first before you jump into Underworld 2. It's more fun that way, I think. Even though I like the Stygian Abyss, I honestly prefer the sequel more just because of its connection to Ultima VII. It's no secret that I love that game to death, though I do miss the two dragons in the original UI versus the stone look in the sequel. And it's a good time to mention that if you haven't seen my Ultima VII The Black Gate video, it might be a good idea to watch that first unless you've already played the game yourself, since I'll be referring to a few events in that game. So let's dive into the Labyrinth of Worlds and get ourselves out of Guardian's Black Gem prison. After the events of the Black Gate, the Avatar is invited to a feast at Lord British's castle to celebrate the reconstruction and for stopping the Guardian from entering Britannia. Not long into the festivities though, the Guardian encased the entire castle in a dome of blackrock and trapping everyone inside. Your quest? Find a way out before your food and water supplies run out. Now going back to the Black Gate a little, it's pretty weird that the Guardian can just summon blackrock at will like this. The Guardian had to have people construct a Black Gate in order for him to cross into Britannia only once the planets are aligned due to a rare event called the Astronomical Alignment. But if he's able to construct blackrock at will like this, wouldn't he be able to cross while waiting for the event to happen? I mean, he is an extra-dimensional god, so he's got all the time in the known universe. I'm being rhetorical here since Underworld 2 isn't developed by Origin, but Ultima as a whole doesn't have the best continuity when it comes to stuff like this. But anyways, when you create your avatar and start the game, you actually start with some okay supplies in the avatar's bedroom. A leather chest piece and some much needed boots, which is very welcome. Remember the Stygian Abyss? It takes a while to find boots in that game, at least on your first playthrough. Another welcome addition is the secret room nearby, which gives you equipment depending on your class and or skills, and serves as a way into the first dungeon of the game. I played a paladin, so the room gave me a nice short sword and some runes to cast magic with. It may seem strange that the avatar stored his stuff in a secret room that the player doesn't even know about, but you do get a map that basically shows you where it is from either the physical game itself or the GOG extras. But hold on, where's the Blackrock sword? All of us who played Ultima VII knows about the Blackrock sword, you know, that sword with the evil demon we trapped inside it back at the Isle of Fire, the one that is basically melded to the avatar no matter what. The very same sword that can kill almost any enemy in Ultima VII with one hit. Well, it's not here, and that is a hell of an oversight. The sword is overpowered for sure starting the game with, so I figured the LookingGlass team decided to scrap it, or maybe they just didn't think to put it in. But they could have had it to where you get in the game later, like maybe someone spirited it away to another world and you manage to reunite with it somehow, making it an endgame weapon. or maybe the demon is inert and you have to find a way to restore the magic of the ether gem in order to restore it to full power. But no, instead it's just not mentioned at all, which is an absolute shame. Especially since the sword itself is very important in Serpent Isle. And in regards to the avatar's stats, wow, what the hell happened here? Where'd all my max stats go from the Forge of Virtue? And yes, I know it's for gameplay reasons, plus this game plays much differently than Ultima VII, but holy crap, man, the avatar has really been slacking off this past year. I would like to see LookingGlass let us transfer our save from Ultima VII to this game like what Origin did with 5 and 6. That would make the game pretty easy, but for once I'd like to see that happen. I suppose if there was a lore reason for that, it might be because a blackrock gem acts as its own world away from Britannia. Basically, when you go from one world to the other, it's like your body stepped into that world for the very first time. It's one of the things that's mentioned in Ultima VII, which explains why the Avatar has to regain his stats and skills all over again, and why his companions decided to just stay in Britannia instead of just going back to Earth. But probably not, as your companions can train you like they've been doing it for years. Ultima doesn't have strong continuity to begin with, like I said, even with the mainline games, with Ultima IX throwing out the baby with the bathwater as an extreme example. But anyways, moving on to the story, you talk to Lord British, who tasks you and the people in the castle with finding a way out of the Blackrock Dome, then spends the rest of the game doing nothing. Seriously, if you thought Lord British was useless in previous games, well, he can't even heal you here due to the Blackrock Dome surrounding the castle, which has the unfortunate side effect of not being able to cast magic above a certain level, at least when you're Britannia. Unlike the Stygian Abyss though, the game isn't set in a big sprawling dungeon, but in 8 different worlds you end up traversing through a Blackrock gem at the bottom of the sewers. And honestly, the game doesn't really give you a good first impression. I mean, who wants to explore sewer levels? There's some great stuff here, like several NPCs to meet, and many goodies to find. But it's when you finally get to the large Blackrock gem on level 4 and enter into another world that the game really starts to pick up. The areas in each world are visually distinct from each other, with various different NPCs to interact with while you try to find a way to break through the Blackrock Dome. And these worlds are worlds the Guardian has either conquered or destroyed, with Killorn Keep having banners of the Guardian full display. I really enjoyed the Prison Tower of Tarna, Killorn Keep, the Pits of Carnage, the Tombs of Precor Loth, and the Ice World, though those sliding ice sections are very annoying without the Levitate or Fly spell. The great music makes up for it though. And even though I only played this game about a year ago, I find the designs of these worlds unique and very memorable, especially when compared to the Stygian Abyss. The Scintillas Academy is probably my least favorite because, oh boy, the jumping. Remember the jumping in the Stygian Abyss? Well, they doubled down on the jumping in this game. There are so many more sections that involve platforming and I don't get it. None of this is fun, it's tedious. You can take all this away and it'll make the game even better than it already is. Good grief. Even the sewers has quite a bit of jumping, with even some floors disappearing and reappearing on you. But it's the rest of the game that is very much worth playing, such as the dungeon crawling and finding interesting equipment you can use, as well as the storyline and side questing. You meet many characters during your adventure, a lot that serve the Guardian and those that continue to resist him. In fact, when you finally arrive at the Ice World, you find out that the people there refuse to give tributes to the Guardian anymore after forging a pact with them, culminating with the Guardian throwing the world into an ice age, leaving it with nothing but a ghostly sentinel, yeti, snowcats, and a very annoying puzzle you have to solve. The prison tower of Tarna is filled with goblins who serve the Guardian and are in conflict with rebels who the Avatar ends up freeing. One of the things I like about the prison tower is that you can actually just slay your way to the top at first if you really wanted to. Other than that, you can sneak your way up there by pretending to be a slave by showing the first goblin a food voucher. It's honestly recommended to do that because then you can talk to all the goblin NPCs on your way up. Then you can slay them right after for experience points like I did. At least most of them, because I ended up releasing a troll and ended up killing the rest of the goblins before I could get to them. Oh well. Killorn Keep is interesting, as the keep itself is actually a floating castle. You never actually see it floating, but the NPCs say so I'll take their word for it. This place is kind of like a Castle British, except they serve the Guardian. It's kind of a break in between the other worlds with a few trainers to interact with, as well as another reference to Wing Commander, where apparently these feline slaves are actually devolved forms of the Kilrathi. Then you got Talaris, the alien world, and this place is very weird, as well as having another annoying puzzle to solve. Kind of not my favorite world, though the NPC aliens are interesting to interact with, where they mention they used to have a purpose other than having specific functions meant to serve the Guardian. Scintillas Academy is definitely my least favorite. It's basically a series of magical tests students have to undergo in order to become full-time magic users. Unfortunately, there's only one NPC here, with the instructors having been killed during the Guardian's invasion over 60 years ago. I usually play fighters or thieves, or a combination of in video games, so doing magical tests isn't really my thing. Though you do find some pretty nifty rewards at the very end if you can make it through the vault. Which is why the Pits of Carnage is one of my favorites. Probably not nearly as bad as the Stygian Abyss, but the Pits of Carnage is where the Guardian throws the worst of the worst in a world that's already filled with brutal warlords and fighters. When you arrive here, you're basically given no respect, with many warriors sizing you up and challenging you to duels into the various elemental arenas. You end up fighting your way to the top dog and earning the respect of everyone inside. Definitely a fun place. If you actually miss crawling in an actual dungeon though, you've got the tombs of Precor Loth, also called the World of Rhiannon. The Guardian invaded this world with soldiers from Killorn Keep, and it's basically a long dungeon crawl through various traps and undead creatures such as skeletons, as well as lich bosses towards the very end, with some interesting lore dumps from the Guardian's slain enemies. Then we're finally at the Ethereal Void, which is simultaneously my favorite and least favorite. Definitely a surreal environment, though the map doesn't work here and the compass doesn't give you any sense of direction. It kinda reminds me of Nowhere in the first Silent Hill game, where you sort of have to map everything out in your head, but worse. But going back to the main story, in order to find a way out of the Blackrock Dome, the Avatar has to find small Blackrock gems and use them on the larger Blackrock gem in order to enter the various worlds. He ends up meeting a sorceress in Killorn Keep who helps him forge a magical rod which the Avatar ends up using on each world in specific spots so he can cut the Guardian's line of power, thus making the Blackrock Dome weaker. Later, he coats himself in a special mud in the Ice World using basilisk oil, which he hardens with the Iron Flesh spell by stepping into lava on the world of Talaris. Then releases an air demon from a gin bottle he got from the Mage Zoranthus from the Pits of Carnage in the Ethereal Void, and absorbs that demon into himself, then uses the Horn of Precor Loth from the world of Rhiannon on the Blackrock Dome, freeing him and his liege and his friends from the Guardian's Blackrock prison. Yeah, it sounds weird when I read it out like that, but let's back up a bit. Remember the ending of the Black Gate? In order to finally finish the game, you have to use Rudium's wand on the Black Gate in order to destroy it. I haven't mentioned it, but basically, the mage Rudium created that wand in order to transmute Blackrock, but since magic was pretty weak at the time during the Guardian's intervention, it ended up just making Blackrock explode instead. Which begs the question, why not just use the wand in the Blackrock Dome? Then the Avatar wouldn't have to go through all this trouble of absorbing an air demon within himself so he can have the power of blowing the Horn of Precor in order to get out. You could say using the wand would be way too dangerous since the Black Gate was much smaller than the dome, but even some sort of mention of it in-game would have been nice, as the wand isn't even in the game. I do like Underworld II, mainly with its immersive atmosphere and characters, but the continuity between each game isn't solid. But I attribute Underworld II to the fact that it was developed by a different company. I just really miss my Blackrock sword. That sword was awesome. They should have found a way to fit it in somehow. But despite of that, I still enjoy Underworld II due to its connection to Ultima VII The Black Gate, which still stands to me as the best CRPG of all time. But as I said, it's not required to play this game in order to understand the Serpent Isle, but it helps to play the Black Gate first before diving into this great dungeon crawler. I'd say keep a guide handy though, because you're guaranteed to get stuck in this game like in any Ultima game. There are many puzzles that will stump you, as well as the overall quest design. It's one of the things the Underworld games hasn't aged well in, well, any Ultima game hasn't aged well in that department. But despite that, I'm likely to want to play this game and its predecessor in the future. I just wish EA would let a company like Night Dive do an enhanced edition of both Underworld games. I'm putting this in here just on the 0.0000001% chance that this gets like a million views or something. But anyways, I'm going to play the Serpent Isle now. Fare thee well, may the virtues be with you. There's actually one more thing I forgot to mention. Remember the original had voice acting? Well, LookingGlass wisely decided to move away from that in the sequel, which means no more.
What news, Corwin?